Every Muslim is a terrorist. Period.
Right now.
Shut your mouth. I don't want to hear your mouth.
Oh, okay.
I'm done with you.
The Taylor's Falls mother is mourning the loss of her teenage son. She says he killed himself after kids bullied him over and over at his school. 15-year-old Jacob Laternal El-Shakawi was a freshman at Chisago Lakes High School in Lindstrom. His family believes he was targeted because he was Muslim.
The number of hate crimes against Muslims has skyrocketed in the UK. Well, in a recent incident, a Turkish pensioner on a London bus was the victim of a vicious racist row by a fellow passenger.
Just last week, the world saw one of the worst manifestations of Islamophobia in the Christchurch mosque shootings, which caused the brutal killing of 50 Muslims. These Muslims had gathered for Friday prayers when the gunfire was opened at them. But while this incident is horrific and unmatched, one must also remember how Muslims in Western countries face discrimination every day. Welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik, and on tonight's show, we discuss the aggression and discrimination Muslims face due to an irrational phobia, a phobia which is rooted more in perceptions as opposed to reality. Joining us for this discussion is Mr. Tahir Nawaz, President at the International Muslim Association of New Zealand, Muslim Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us. And we also have with us Dr. Chris Galloway, who is a professor of communication studies, also joining us from New Zealand. Thank you, Dr. Chris, for joining us. Mr. Nawaz, let me begin with you. What currently are the sentiments of the Muslim community following the attack?
Thank you very much for giving us opportunity in this program. As we all know that this incident, what has occurred, it was never expected. It's a great shock for everyone. Everyone is sad. Some are angry, but it have a totally different reactions from the communities, including Muslim communities, towards the local skivvies and also to the government as well. The response is overwhelming. Whole nation come together and they're coming and supporting the Muslim community. Even though this event was directly towards the Muslims, but we all believe that this was one of the incident that was carried out not by the New Zealander, was from the outsider. We still believe that we have a lot of potential, and we still one of the most peaceful nation. This sort of incidents is never good for anyone, but it's bringing something better. You will have seen the news. You'll have seen how the response of the government is, how the response of the Muslim community is. We all coming together more closer, more stronger, and building the better relation with also different religious communities as well.
I wonder at this point in time, how important do you find interfaith harmony and capacity building between peoples of different communities?
I've been part of the Abrahamic Council and Interfaith Council as well. I believe it's one of the most important things as a Muslims or any other religion. We should be doing it, and building those relations and building these bridges and live as this is the only mean to live in peace and harmony. The interfaith relations. And just with this incident, I'll just elaborate. These incidents have bring all those communities together. Government have asked us to close our mosques due to the security risks. We got the people from synagogue, churches, temples, Hindu temples, Buddha temples, and many of them, they're all offering us their place to come and pray there, and they are offering all those sort of helps. So yes, definitely, if we have the good relations with all other communities, it makes help and it makes a difference as well.
And that's very, very heartening to hear. Mr. Nawaz, you mentioned here how this incident came as a shock, and of course it did because of the gruesome nature of it. But also something I wanted to ask you was in relation to an article written by Anjum Rahman, who is from the Islamic Women's Council of New Zealand, in which she stated that the Muslim community had long feared an attack. Was there an environment prior to the attack which caused for rising fears amongst the Muslim community?
No, there was no indication anywhere that there's any rise. There's a minor incidents here and there. It occurs, but there was no significant incident that indicates that this sort of thing will happen. Even though the people they involved in this crime, the terrorists, they was not in the government watch list for any sort of crime as well. So this is something to note as well.
Yeah. Okay, so Dr. Chris Galloway, I'd like to pull you into this conversation as well. With an incident such as this, could you tell us how important it is for the media to play an active but also a progressive and positive role?
I think what we have seen with this tragedy in Christchurch is not only the coming together of the nation, as Mr. Nawaz has mentioned, but also a focus on online media in particular. The Prime Minister, of whom many Kiwis are very proud for the way she has handled this, has been saying that technology giants such as Google and Facebook have got questions to answer because of hosting videos, including the video taken by the shooter as he worked his evil work in the mosques. Facebook, of course, has said that it has taken down at least 1.5 million videos from the shooting in the time since it took place. And one of the indications that the whole sharing of video has been taken very, very seriously in New Zealand is that an 18-year-old who tried to share the video of the shooting is currently in jail and due to appear before the courts early next month. This is an indication of how seriously the government is taking this. And I would just like to add to what Mr. Nawaz said about the country coming together. In Wellington, our capital, there was at least 10,000 people who attended a vigil after these terrible events.
And Dr. Chris, here when you mentioned social media specifically, I do want to ask you alongside that train of thought, what role do you think social media has been playing with the rise of Islamophobia, serving as a platform for anti-Muslim sentiments?
Well, clearly it's been playing a significant role, and online media have been playing a significant role not only in relation to Islamophobia, but also in relation to other forms of extremism. It's well known, for example, that Daesh, or Islamic State as they have called themselves, have been able to make effective use of social media in their recruitment efforts. So there's a platform which has basically no cost to use. It's easy to get onto it, and there are few, if any, controls.
And Dr. Chris, I'd like to show a visual of a YouTube video that has been uploaded and is still existing on YouTube. Under the video, the caption states that Muslims are taking over the world at an alarming rate. And under the description, it stated that there were 100,000 Muslims in America in 1970. There are 9 million Muslims in America now. Our grandchildren will be overrun by Muslims, Sharia law, abuse of women, etc. Now, my question here is, when we're talking about Islamophobia, we're talking about the incitement of violence, does the onus not lie with these platforms to regulate the content that is being uploaded? Now, this video echoes in many ways the sentiments of the shooter of the New Zealand attacks.
I would agree with you. There is a responsibility that companies which are providing platforms have to society to help protect society against these extreme views, these totally inaccurate views. It's worth noting that in New Zealand, We have something like 70 mosques throughout the country for a population of around 4.7 million. And I put myself on Facebook a comment saying, please, my Muslim friends, and I have friends in Pakistan as well as elsewhere, do not think that this terrible event represents the way that New Zealanders think of Muslims and Islam, because it absolutely does not.
Yeah. And Mr. Tahir Nawaz, when we're talking about online Islamophobia and how that's affecting the community at a large scale, what could you tell us about that?
I definitely agreed with it. It's playing a big role, online media, because as Chris said earlier, it's very easy, it's free to use, and it, regardless of what's happening around the world, is in just a matter of seconds, anyone can see. Let's say we talk about what's happening in US, the way the administration, Trump, is playing a role in this as well. It affects all over the world, and especially the users are the young people, the youth, and that's where it's increasing, because majority of the users are youth. They're using a lot this social media, and that's how the things are going wrong.
Yeah,
it should be regulated. How? This is a big question.
Yeah. Definitely, that is a question that many people are trying to especially tackle following this attack. Mr. Tahir, last question to you. How is the community now willing and wanting to move forward after the attack? Are there going to be any measures taken place in regards to Islamophobia, trying to place specific emphasis on it and trying to somehow eradicate it completely?
We are closely working with the New Zealand government, as possibly you know that our Prime Minister have visited us yesterday, and similarly with the Governor General as well. I have a meeting with them. We have a plan for moving forward. That's we're going to be communicating directly with the New Zealand government, and we can raise whatever the issues, whatever the problems we have with them, and they'll be working with us directly, and there'll be no barrier in between us. And also, probably you have seen they have done so much in a short time since this incident happened last Friday, and they have make so many practical steps to make sure that our safety is there for all the Muslims.
Yeah,
thank you. Definitely, there's a way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tahir Nawaz, for joining us and taking the time to talk to us. Dr. Chris, let's move forward and taking the discussion from the lens of the media and its portrayal of Muslims. I'd like to talk about how is it that the Western media has been actively trying to promote one narrative regarding the Muslims and has been successful in demonizing Muslims all across the world, which is fueling Islamophobia.
I think it is due to the lack of controls that we have been talking about. Actions, of course, are very symbolic. One of the things that we have seen in New Zealand here in the last few days is our Prime Minister visiting mosques, wearing headscarf, embracing imams and others, and showing by her actions that Muslims are regarded as an integral part of the New Zealand community. I think we are fortunate in that this is the attitude of our government, and we know that this is not necessarily the attitude of governments around the world.
Yeah.
So I think that in places where there are few, if any, controls, it is possible for this evil to flourish.
Yeah.
I'm expecting that in New Zealand, there's our Prime Minister hugging someone. I think in New Zealand, we will also see the inquiry that the government is calling of places like Google and Facebook.
Yeah. Dr. Chris, when we're talking about social media platforms, of course, it's a very long debate on how to regulate them. But something that I do want to draw your attention towards is a post or how, in fact, a shooting was covered by a publication, a UK-based publication, Mail Online, in which it humanized the killer, saying that something happened during his travels, how a blonde little boy turned into a far-right mass killer and murdered 49 worshippers after his father died of cancer, and he left Australia to tour the world, including North Korea and Pakistan. Now, what we're seeing here is a very, very stark contrast to when other shootings take place, especially of people of color, whether them being African American or of any other descent. What can you tell us about this?
The Mail Online is but it is a sensationalist paper, and I personally deplore them, as you rightly say, trying to humanize this evil. I would prefer rather that publications, as is happening here in New Zealand, focus on the recovery and the way that the community is coming together to grieve and to look forward, as Mr. Nawaz was talking about, through relations with the government and others. So I think it's very unfortunate that the Mail Online has tried to give this killer a human face.
And it is very significant to mention here that the number of anti-Muslims attacks in the UK are at an all-time high. So when we see publications like these fueling certain sentiments, creating stark contrasts between individuals, it definitely adds to the process.
I think it does. Often what happens is that people who are exposed to different forms of media do not think particularly deeply about the issues that are presented to them. We're all busy in different ways, and it takes time to pay attention to things. So the takeout from that is that people can easily absorb slogans, headline approaches to issues that actually are very complex. And this leads to the kind of shallow and wrong attitudes that we've seen through this tragic event in Christchurch and around the world, as you rightly point out.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think needs to be the purpose of those who are in control, editorial control of these publications? Do you think the government needs to intervene in any way to at least make sure that publications are following a certain regulation in terms of the content they are releasing, if it is inciting certain sentiments or if it's fostering certain sentiments, in this case where it would foster positive sentiments of sympathy for the attacker?
I think we have seen the beginnings of some, what you might call, informal regulation in New Zealand in the last few days. There was general agreement and collaboration between the main media platforms here that they would not show the video shot by the attacker with the body camera that he was wearing. As I mentioned earlier, someone who tried to share that video is now in jail. So the government can build on that collaboration, as I see it, and encourage platforms in New Zealand, and I guess perhaps by example elsewhere as well, to follow that kind of collaboration based on a duty to the nation, based on a duty to society, not to propagate these extreme views.
Definitely. Dr. Chris Galloway, hold on to that thought. We're also joined by Mr. Chamanka Gamage, who's a sociologist joining us from Sri Lanka. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Chamanka, when we're talking about how Islamophobia is fostering and how different acts contribute towards it, what role do you think microaggressions play?
Islamophobia. I believe that the main reason for this Islamophobia is that when we look at the Western world, it seems that Western culture is predominantly isolated from the other cultures such as Asian, Middle Eastern, and so on. So the main reason what I find is that they have different perspectives. So because of that, they really don't want to believe, like they really don't agree with the facts that.
So let me ask you this: when we're talking about how there is an otherization of Muslims which causes for Islamophobia, what do you think the role of interfaith harmony plays in at least trying to understand the other? Because isn't it fear of the other which causes for a rise in phobias?
Yes, that of course, like I mentioned, it's basically there is also a part which improves the phobia is that it's a globalization. People attempt to live in this bubble. They are unable to get out of that bubble and expose themselves. So what we do is we whatever we see from the television, whatever we read from the social media, and whatever we grasp from the newspapers, we attempt to only absorb those information. We don't dig deeper, and we don't attempt to understand and see the richness of these cultures and these religions. So sometimes our head is only into the scriptures. What we should do is we should explore more. So this phobia becomes Islam is the world's second largest religion and second recognized religion. And I believe that it is a threat for some people in some countries, and because of that, this phobia comes. And also, it seems like when I did my research, the main reason Tehran made this shooting attack is because it was due to the increasement of immigration. So because of that, this was one of the main reasons that takes place. So mainly people go to another country.
That is definitely a faulty reason that we must reiterate, that immigration does not necessarily, if it's leading to a fear of Muslims, then of course it's a phobia, and a phobia being irrational.
Yeah, phobia is obviously irrational, and it is mainly towards Islam. Muslim population is the second largest population in the world. So increasement of that makes other people. So when it comes to employment and sometimes many the people from the same country, right? They don't get that same opportunity as the other immigrant gets. So I studied in the United States, and when I was there, I came across these instances like Dhaka. So
and
like,
do you feel like you faced any sort of hindrances being an immigrant in the United States?
No, because what I said is I went to a country where they are rich multicultural. It's a rich multicultural country. Yet there is racism going on. But I really didn't feel that because I felt very welcomed in that community. But as an immigrant, I also faced a lot of these.
Okay, Chamanka, hold on to that thought. We're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to discuss this further. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. While we continue our discussion, we are now joined by Mr. Naveed, who has joined us. Mr. Naveed, who has joined us from Christchurch, who lost his brother during the attack. Our deepest condolences to you, Mr. Naveed, and your entire family. What can you tell us about the community holding the community's reaction following the attack?
Well, as far as the community concerned in Christchurch, they are all very shocked because New Zealand is very peaceful, very humble, and very friendly, having very friendly environment and very peaceful country. The whole country is in a shock, and they are paying their condolences, and they are grieving with us, and they are almost in a shock in every way, and this is completely out of character for the people of New Zealand.
And Mr. Naveed, what can you tell us about the government's response in this regard? How have they reached out to the community?
government of New Zealand
Yes,
or
New Zealand.
Pakistan?
Both
Well,
governments.
as far as the government of New Zealand is concerned, they have uttered us a complete support in every term, in terms of enforcement of law, enforcement of providing the injured and the diseased with every kind of support, like providing them basic first aids and then giving them extra resource in terms of manpower and doctors, paramedics, everything. They are providing us a generous hand and as well as any moral support that is needed at this great time of grief. And their support is out of character, and we really appreciate. The community is very thankful on behalf of the grieved families as well.
And Mr. Naveed Shahid, you did mention here how it was a complete shock. Was there any indication of something like this to have happened? Were there any incidents prior to this attack that would have suggested something like this?
Actually, there was no indication. There was no prior indication. The person was like a lone wolf, and no one has any clue about if something gonna happen. Because if you see the area, both of the mosques, they are in the heart of the Christchurch, and there was no one can even imagine that this thing can happen in such a beautiful and peaceful land of New Zealand.
Thank you so much, Mr. Naveed, for joining us and talking to us about this. Dr. Chris Galloway, I'd like to move on and talk a little about the language that surrounds when we have to cover tragedies. And we mentioned earlier about how semantics definitely play a role in how covering an issue can mold perceptions. What do you think in this environment where, of course, there are explicit acts of aggression, but there are also more subtle acts of aggression in terms of language? What role do you think language plays here?
I think language plays an incredibly important part, and I was encouraged that our Prime Minister very early on said that there is no other way to describe this tragedy.
Yeah, there was...
She was very clear about naming it as that, and I think that helps to kind of frame the whole event in a proper way. Language, of course, does become incredibly powerful, particularly at a tragic time like this. One of the things that the Prime Minister said, and it's been repeated over and over again, she said, these people are us. Yeah. They are not apart from us, they are us. And so I think through short phrases like that, memorable phrases like that,
definitely,
she has been helping the country to come together within that kind of framework, that language framework, if you will.
And Dr. Chris, while she has been portraying a very, very positive image, on the other end, I want to talk about other European nations specifically in which we're witnessing a rise in Islamophobia. A French Human Rights Institute found that 45% of National Front supporters do not consider dirty Arab a discriminatory term. Now, in this case, I'm talking about microaggressions and how society faces them at large. What can you tell us about that? How language is playing a role to fuel Islamophobia?
I think in a situation where language is being used to distance and, as you were saying earlier in this program, to represent Muslims as the other, it's incumbent on governments to step in where they can and make it very clear, as our government has, that this is not acceptable. We're talking about, in the case of New Zealand, we're talking about a country that has, amongst its 4.7 million people, at least 200 different nationalities represented. Yeah. My city of Auckland is regarded as one of the most diverse, culturally speaking, cities in the world. Nearly 40% of our population was not born here. So it's important that, as you mentioned earlier, the media and also the government move very quickly to stamp out these incidents where they occur of language being used to distance people from the rest of society.
And Chamanka, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation. When we were talking about perceptions developing, what do you think is the main cause for racist sentiments, Islamophobic sentiments developing even in very, very young children? What role does conditioning play in this?
I believe this is mostly based on dark web. So mainly in our context, in our modern context, many children attempt to use social media and then electronic media. With these, we get these negative images and stereotypes based on Muslims, Islamic, about the dress code, so on and so forth. So I believe these are the main reasons that conditions our brain to and build hatred in our hearts. So I believe that as a society, we need to get together and ban, and we should take actions to take actions against this kind of dark web and hate speech. Especially hate speech shouldn't be we need to prevent such hate speech taking place on websites and on Twitter. As I can remember, Tarrant has stated like a lot of hate speech on, but I believe the government didn't pay much attention to it. So if we pay much attention to what's happening around us, these things wouldn't happen.
Yeah. And what role do you think community leaders and opinion leaders play in trying to cement certain stereotypes and trying to promote a good image?
Prime Minister Ardern, she's doing a great job. Like, she makes that whatever that took place in New Zealand, she's trying her best to sympathize, and she's trying to be a strength to these people who lost their families, beloved families. However, there are some countries that try to create wars and build wars and separate people from one another. But what we need to do is we spend trillions of dollars finding humans in other planets, but we are not protecting our own people in our own planet. So what we should do is say, regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender, we need to uplift the humanity. So as leaders, some leaders have different stereotypes. For an example, if you talk about far-right candidates, these people have this extremist perspective. We need to. It's okay to have certain biases against certain kind, but it's not the right to, make it popular and publicize it on media so that we attempt to encourage many people to join.
And Chamanka, hold on to that thought. I want to ask Dr. Chris here. We've seen Trump and how he's been very, very vocal against immigrants. And we've seen how that has fueled not only xenophobia, but Islamophobia in various parts of the world. What role do you think after this shooting do politicians, especially right-wing politicians, need to keep in mind while giving speeches, while throwing around rhetoric?
My own take on it is that the issue is not immigration so much. The issue is inbuilt racism that people have. And in our country, we are particularly, I believe, very welcoming to immigrants. I am very aware that that is not the case in other countries. In situations where there is an anti-immigration movement, as there is in some countries in Europe, as you mentioned earlier, I think it's important for the government to allow free expression to the point that it does not demonize minority communities.
Yeah.
We need to value freedom of expression, but as with anything, rights carry with them responsibilities, and the right to free expression should, I believe, be moderated by the responsibility not to do harm.
Yeah. We're also joined by Mr. Farrukh Qaisarani, who is a member of the Christchurch community. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Farrukh. Mr. Farrukh, following this tragedy, do you think there will be another reality for the Muslims in New Zealand?
Well, the sense of fear is already there, and it's not just in the Muslim community, but it's in other communities as well. I have attended a few community gatherings in last couple of days, actually more than just two, and every community is fearful, especially the migrant communities. If your question is this, but it will dilute with some time, and depending on what the government policies are and how the attitude of the other community is, which is at the moment very positive. And I hope it will dilute soon.
Yeah. And Mr. Farrukh, your daughter also survived the attack, and we are very grateful that she did so, and our condolences to all the community members who lost family members and friends. After this, what has been the response of the community, and how do you think those people are being given support who have lost friends and family to this tragedy?
The sport is overwhelming. There are different types of sport at the moment available because I am practically involved at the moment in all that sport. One is what we call victim sport team. One is called family assistance team. These are all professional police employees. Then there is a community team. Yesterday we received a team full of experts, psychologists, social workers from Auckland, and they were just willing to help whatever the help they can give. At the moment, actually, what's happening, there is so much support and so many people coming into Christchurch that the direction is lost a little bit. There are too many people, and somehow I think people should realize that the victims, they need some space. So give them space. If they need, let them give the support. If they don't, please avoid. It's not disrespect to the people who are coming to Christchurch, but my request would be that please ask the authorities where they are needed before they come, because at the moment, Christchurch, there is no space in Christchurch.
Definitely, and that's a very strong point you make there. What can you tell us about the organization? You've said that there is no space there. How are the authorities trying to manage the overwhelming support? How are they trying to cope with the situation?
At the moment, all the communities are doing their best. I understand, like yesterday, the main Gurdwara in Christchurch, they opened their door. They said everyone is welcomed. Even the churches, they have opened their doors. They said anyone is welcome. Even the Marae. Marae is in New Zealand. It's like the indigenous people. They have their own religious belief and thoughts, and very respectful. This morning, like I attended the two Fatiha prayers. One was at the Central Mosque and one was at the Linwood Mosque. Both mosques are still closed due to forensic examination, which is still going on. But they open up at least the front side so people can pray and recite Fatiha. And the good thing was that the Maori community actually especially requested that they want to pray before or with Muslims, and that actually happened. I mean, I haven't seen any kind of support by other communities before. So I really appreciate that.
And that's very heartening to hear. Mr. Farrukh, I'd like to talk a little about those being tried for the crime. What could you tell us about that situation right now?
This charge is a murder charge. Actually, in New Zealand, there is no capital punishment. So that means the maximum sentence would be life in prison, which is he's likely going to see if he is convicted. There will be a due process. He will be represented in court, which he was on Saturday. And now, obviously, the process will continue. He will give his second appearance. Some lawyer might be assigned to him, but at the moment, the news are that he is wanting to represent himself. So that means he doesn't want a lawyer. Whether he wants publicity, most likely yes. But that's what his right is. Obviously, we will say he doesn't have any right. And people are right in thinking so. And if he is convicted, then obviously he will serve his sentence. Given there is an agreement between New Zealand and Australia, what we call Trans-Tasman Mutual Cooperation Act. And under that act, people can freely move to other countries. Now, that will be up to the state whether they want to sentence him here and he serve his sentence here, or he's deported to Australia back, but that's for a later stage.
Okay. So that's something that you've given us an update on the trial there. Mr. Farrukh, just before we end the show, I'd like to ask your opinion on what the role of community leaders needs to be, not just in New Zealand, but all around the world where we are seeing and witnessing anti-Muslim crimes.
I really appreciate it. I think that's the most valid question. The valid answer, I would say, the best answer I have, or my thinking is, that we need all these people who are listening to us today, because we are the victims. This should not be like only once we are the victims you are listening us. We are the victims all along since the media has created a war against targeting Muslims. They have picked the wrong people. Yeah. Now, my request would be that please come on social media. We need your keyboards. We need your screens. When you see people spreading hate, spreading war, advocating war and warmongering, these kind of things, please stop them. Because we Muslims, we are trying to stop these people, especially the social media has played a very negative part. We are trying to stop them, but we cannot. You people, because those people who are spreading hate, maybe from your community. Yeah. You people stop them, you have different impact compared to us. So that would be my request. Please stop these warmongers and hate speeches whenever they speak and wherever they speak.
Thank you so much, Mr. Farrukh, for joining us and talking to us. Dr. Chris, last question to you, and following from what Mr. Farrukh said, do you think this incident was a much-needed wake-up call for governments and social media platforms for trying to promote a negative propaganda, and they will now target war-mongering online and in the mainstream media?
I certainly hope that our government moves on that, and that other governments do the same. Big technology companies such as Google and Facebook were already in the government sites over tax issues, and now I suspect that the focus will shift towards a kind of social responsibility even more in terms of what these platforms are allowed to be hosted on their technology.
And do you think that the problem of whether this is freedom of expression will also be tackled in light of the fact that when it's inciting violence, it shouldn't just be considered without consequence, freedom of expression?
I think that in light of the terrible events in Christchurch, it is inarguable that social media needs some kind of controls, that the authorities need some kind of controls, so that hate speech cannot be multiplied across cyberspace.
And Dr. Chris, there was just another firing in Holland, and we're seeing an increase in violence, an increase in extremism. What do you think needs to be done for the media and communication outlets in trying to cover these events more sensitively?
Obviously, that's a matter for the individual media event, but I think governments and politicians can help set the tone. We have seen in Australia a particular far-right politician who has adopted a deplorable attitude based on his position in regard to immigration. He is rightly being condemned and criticised for his position. I think that's the sort of thing that needs to happen where these unhelpful attitudes arise around the world. People need not just to kind of shake their heads and say how terrible it is, but actually act to marginalise those people who are trying to use hate speech to stir up unrest in society.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Chris Galloway, for joining us and talking to us. Thanks for watching Indus Special. We will see you again tomorrow with more stories. Take care and goodbye.